Welcome back to the Beyond Practice podcast, the show where we really like to kind of dig into those ideas that matter most to you. And I'm Taylor Grant, and I'm here to guide you through all that fascinating research and real-world stories, the stuff that gets us thinking.
And I'm Casey Bishop. I'm here to help kind of connect the dots and uncover all those aha moments that make it really click.
Before we get started, I just want to give a huge shout out to David Carton for his amazing support of this show. You are the best. Okay, so let's get down to business. This is episode 2, Clarity, Building Precision in High-Stakes Teams. And this is actually the second deep dive in our 7-part series exploring high-performance work systems, or as we call it, HPWS.
So if you haven't already, definitely go back and check out episode 1 to really get that foundation. But for those of you just joining us now, HPWS, it's all about creating those work environments where people not only perform at their peak, but they also thrive too.
Exactly. And today we're focusing on like one of the cornerstones of HPWS, and that's clarity. You might be thinking, okay, clarity, that's pretty obvious, right? But think about high-stakes environments like oil rigs, emergency response teams, operating rooms. I mean, these are places where even the tiniest slip-up can have huge consequences.
Yeah, in those situations, clarity, it's more than just a good idea. I mean, it's absolutely critical. It's literally the difference between a well-oiled machine and complete and utter chaos. And the research backs this up. We actually have a study here that found that a lack of role clarity was a major contributing factor to the Deepwater Horizon oil spill.
That's a pretty chilling example. And it shows why we need to unpack this idea of clarity, go beyond just saying it's important and really figure out what it looks like in practice. Because, we want to give you, the listener, actionable strategies to boost clarity within your own team, no matter what field you're in.
Exactly. So let's start with a really solid definition. When we talk about clarity within HPWS, we're not just talking about, being able to see clearly. It's about that precise communication, those well-defined roles and responsibilities, and just a shared understanding of those expected outcomes.
Okay, so it's like everyone on the team has a clear roadmap, and they know where they're going, how to get there, and what their specific role is in reaching that final destination.
That's a great analogy. And, it prevents those metaphorical car crashes that can happen when everyone's driving blind. One of the key components of actually, making clarity happen, operationalizing it, is setting those crystal clear goals and expectations right from the start.
And I'm guessing those goals should be more than just, let's do our best.
Yeah.
Right.
You got it. Vague goals always lead to vague results. That's where SMART goals come in. And we really want to break this down for you because it's such a foundational principle.
Yeah.
So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So instead of saying, improve communication, a SMART goal would be something like reduce miscommunication during shift handovers by 15% within the next quarter.
So it's about making those goals super concrete and trackable.
Absolutely. And those goals need to be communicated upfront, revisited regularly, and here's the real kicker. They have to be tied directly to individual roles and responsibilities.
So if we're sticking with that roadmap analogy, it's not just about knowing the destination. It's about each person knowing their specific route and like which lanes they're supposed to be driving in.
Exactly. And this is where documentation becomes a total superhero. Clear job descriptions, documented workflows, and a robust code of conduct that's really championed by leadership. This creates the framework for accountability and makes sure everyone's singing from the same song sheet.
I love that idea of singing from the same song sheet. Because it's not just about following the rules, it's about everyone understanding the overall harmony of the team. But, speaking from experience as someone who's been on plenty of teams, things don't always go according to plan. What happens when there's a roadblock or someone veers off course?
That's where those regular reviews and that open communication come in. Think of them like those pit stops in a race. A chance to refuel, make adjustments, and address any issues before they become major problems. And these reviews aren't just top-down, from the boss to the team. It's about encouraging peer-to-peer feedback and creating a culture of continuous improvement.
Okay, so it's like those daily huddles we hear so much about with agile teams, right? Those quick check-ins where everyone can share what they're working on, any challenges they're facing, and how they can support each other.
Exactly. It normalizes that open communication and makes problem-solving a total team effort. And honestly, it can save a ton of time and frustration in the long run. But let's be real, even with the best intentions implementing these changes, they can be met with some resistance.
Yeah, I can see that. People get so comfortable with the way things are, even if it's not working perfectly. Change can be scary.
So true. But here's where leadership plays a crucial role. Leaders need to be transparent about the why behind the changes, consistent in their messaging, and genuinely committed to supporting the team through that transition.
So it's not just about saying, do this. It's about explaining the why walking the walk and creating that sense of trust and shared purpose.
Exactly. And when you have that foundation of clarity, it ripples out in all directions. It not only boosts performance, but it also reduces stress. It's a sense of psychological safety. And ultimately, it fosters a much more resilient and adaptable team.
Okay, so we've laid out the framework for clarity. But I think it's time to get into some real-life examples,
Hmm.
because sometimes those abstract concepts don't really hit home until we see how they play out in the real world.
Absolutely. And we've got some pretty powerful case studies lined up. We're going to take you inside the Deepwater Horizon explosion, Hurricane Katrina, and Operation Anaconda. These are stories from high consequence fields that show the real impact of clarity or lack thereof.
These are going to be some intense examples, but also incredibly insightful. So buckle up, listeners, because we're about to take a deep dive into the consequences of when clarity breaks down.
Let's start with the Deepwater Horizon explosion back in 2010. This event, as you likely know it, was a catastrophic reminder of what can happen when roles are unclear, communication is fragmented, and objectives are misaligned.
11 lives were lost, and it resulted in the largest marine oil spill in history. It's a tragedy that really drives home the human cost of these breakdowns.
And when you dig into the investigation reports, one of the key issues identified was a lack of role clarity among the personnel from BP Transocean and Halliburton. There was confusion about who was responsible for key decisions related to, well, safety and integrity.
It's almost like a game of hot potato with no one wanting to hold on to the responsibility.
Exactly. And the decision-making around the cement bond log test, which was ultimately bypassed without a proper consensus, is a prime example of this. Some workers assumed others were monitoring those critical safety parameters.
So you have these critical decisions being made, but no one's really taking ownership because everyone's assuming someone else is in charge. That's terrifying.
It is. And this lack of clarity wasn't just limited to individual roles, it really permeated the communication channels as well. Teams were operating in silos with limited cross-team collaboration and unclear escalation pathways for safety concerns. Imagine knowing about a potential danger, but not being able to effectively share that information, or having it get lost in the chain.
It's chilling to think about the warnings that were potentially missed because of those communication breakdowns.
And at the organizational level, BP's culture, which prioritized cost-cutting and speed over safety, added another layer of complexity. It created pressure on teams to deliver results quickly, often at the expense of operational clarity and thoroughness.
It's like that classic trade-off between speed and accuracy, but with much higher stakes.
Yeah.
And in this case, the consequences were devastating.
And this misalignment of priorities was compounded by inconsistencies in safety protocols between BP Transocean and Halliburton. This lack of a unified approach to safety further muddied the waters, leaving critical responsibilities undefined.
So if we step back and look at this through the lens of HPWS principles, it seems like having those SMART goals, regularly reviewing roles and responsibilities, and clear documentation could have been instrumental in preventing this tragedy, or at least mitigating the risks.
Absolutely. By fostering cross-team collaboration, establishing clear communication channels, and aligning operational goals with safety as a top priority, organizations can create a much safer and more effective work environment. Deepwater Horizon is a stark reminder that these principles aren't just abstract ideas, they have real-world implications.
All right, so we've got this powerful example of what happens when clarity breaks down in the oil and gas industry.
Yeah,
And I'm guessing these same principles apply to other high-stakes environments as well, right?
absolutely. And our next case study takes us into the chaotic world of disaster response. We're going to examine Hurricane Katrina in 2005, a disaster that exposed critical failures in clarity at both the team and organizational level.
Katrina was a devastating event, and the response was widely criticized. What were some of the key breakdowns in clarity that contributed to the challenges in providing aid?
So, despite having extensive resources available, there was a significant lack of clarity surrounding the roles of various response teams. Local and federal emergency response teams were unsure of their specific responsibilities, which led to confusion, duplicated efforts, and delayed action.
So you have this massive disaster unfolding, and the people who are supposed to be helping are stumbling over each other because they don't know who's doing what.
Exactly. And one of the most striking examples of this was the delayed deployment of resources from FEMA, partly attributed to a lack of clarity regarding whether state officials had formally requested federal assistance.
It's like a breakdown in communication at the highest level,
Hmm.
and in a disaster situation, every minute counts.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just the big picture stuff. On the ground, first responders often lacked clear guidance on resource allocation, which resulted in some areas getting flooded with aid while others were completely neglected.
So it's like that lack of clarity was creating this ripple effect from the top levels of government all the way down to the people on the front lines.
Right. And the communication breakdowns were just as devastating. Teams relied on different communication systems, making it incredibly difficult to share vital information. There were even instances where reports of levee breaches were delayed or didn't reach the appropriate emergency management agencies, which of course worsened the flooding.
It's almost unimaginable that in this day and age, communication could be such a barrier to effective disaster response.
I know, right? But it highlights the importance of having those clear communication channels established beforehand, having everyone on the same system, and having clear protocols for escalating critical information.
And it's not just about technology, it's about having a clear chain of command, right?
Absolutely. Another major issue during Katrina was the absence of a unified command structure. FEMA state governments and local agencies were operating without a clear chain of command, leading to conflicting directives and further delays.
So it's like trying to steer a ship with multiple captains all giving different orders. It's a recipe for disaster, literally.
Exactly. And this lack of clarity in leadership roles further compounded the challenges on the ground. It's clear that a well-defined chain of command, clear communication channels, and role-specific training are absolutely essential for effective disaster management.
Katrina really underscores the need for regular reviews and adaptability in plans, too, because
Uh,
even the best plans can fall apart when faced with a real-world crisis.
Right. The response was hampered by outdated plans that hadn't been adequately reviewed or updated to account for a catastrophe of this scale. Without the ability to adapt to the evolving situation, the response fell tragically short.
So it's not just about having a plan. It's about having a plan that's adaptable and can evolve as the situation changes. And that requires clarity in terms of who's making those decisions and how they're communicating those changes.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to those HPWS principles. Collaborative planning sessions, frequent reviews of roles and responsibilities, and establishing a unified organizational code of conduct can make a world of difference in ensuring that teams are aligned and truly prepared for large-scale emergencies.
Okay, so we've seen how the lack of clarity can have devastating consequences in both the oil and gas industry and disaster response. But I think it's time to shift gears a bit and look at how these principles apply in a completely different context.
Yeah.
The military.
Great idea. Our next case study takes us inside Operation Anaconda in 2002, a military operation in Afghanistan that, despite achieving its objectives, exposed significant issues stemming from a lack of clarity.
So even in a military context where you'd think clarity would be paramount, there can be breakdowns.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
And Operation Anaconda is a prime example of how ambiguity in objectives, breakdowns in coordination, and a lack of a clear command structure can lead to confusion and avoidable casualties.
Okay, let's break this down. What were the specific challenges with clarity during Operation Anaconda?
Well, the operation was conducted in the early stages of the war in Afghanistan and aimed to eliminate al-Qaeda and Taliban forces in the Shahikat Valley. However, small unit commanders on the ground weren't entirely clear about the mission's scope. They were uncertain whether their primary objective was to engage offensively or to contain the enemy.
So you have these soldiers going into a dangerous situation, but they don't even know what their primary goal is. That's incredible.
I know, right? And this lack of clarity at the tactical level caused delays and inefficiencies. It also meant that some units were underprepared and facing unexpectedly strong resistance because they weren't adequately briefed on the changing parameters of the mission.
It's mind-boggling to think that they weren't given all the information they needed to make informed decisions. What about the coordination between different branches of the military? Was there any breakdown there?
Definitely. The coordination between the U.S. Army, Air Force, Navy, and coalition forces was also fragmented. There were delays in tactical air support due to unclear procedures for requesting airstrikes. And there were even instances of friendly fire and missed opportunities to exploit enemy weaknesses because of insufficient communication between special operations forces and conventional troops.
So you have these different units operating in the same area, but they're not effectively communicating with each other. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this lack of coordination stemmed from a broader issue: the absence of a centralized command structure. U.S. conventional forces were under the command of Central Command, while Special Operations Forces had their own separate chain of command.
So it's like having two CEOs running the same company, but they're not talking to each other. It's just not going to work.
Right. And this lack of a unified command structure compounded the confusion on the ground. It also meant that crucial information wasn't flowing effectively between intelligence and operational units, leaving field commanders with an incomplete picture of the situation.
So they're making these life or death decisions, but they don't have all the information they need. That's incredibly dangerous.
It is. And to make matters worse, teams on the ground were often operating without real-time updates, meaning they were making tactical decisions based on outdated information.
It's like trying to navigate a city using a map that's 10 years old. You're
Hmm.
going to get lost or worse.
Exactly. And Operation Anaconda really highlights the importance of those real-time updates and rapid dissemination of intelligence, especially in a dynamic and unpredictable environment like a battlefield.
Okay, so we've seen how these breakdowns in clarity played out in a military operation.
Hmm.
But what can we learn from this?
Okay.
What are the key takeaways for anyone working in a high-stakes environment?
Well, at the team level, Operation Anaconda underscores the importance of clear communication and role definition. Tactical units need to know exactly what they're supposed to be doing and how their actions fit into the overall mission. And they need to be able to communicate effectively with each other and with their superiors.
So it's about having that shared understanding and being able to communicate effectively in a high-pressure situation.
Right. And at the organizational level, strategic alignment between command structures and operational units is crucial for resource optimization and mission success. If everyone's not on the same page, it's going to create chaos and inefficiency.
So it's about having that clarity from the top down, ensuring that everyone understands the overall goals and how their work contributes to achieving them.
Exactly. And that's where those HPWS principles come into play. By implementing things like clear mission statements, collaborative planning sessions, and regular communication check-ins, organizations can create a much more cohesive and effective operating environment.
So it's not just about having a plan. It's about having a plan that everyone understands, buys into, and can execute effectively.
Mm.
And that requires clarity at every level of the organization. But I think it's time to maybe zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture.
I like where you're going with this because clarity isn't just about checking boxes and meeting deadlines. It's about creating a work environment where people can actually thrive.
Exactly. It's about fostering a culture of trust and psychological safety, where individuals feel valued and supported and empowered to bring their best selves to work.
And that's especially important in those high consequence fields we've been talking about where the pressure is just relentless and the stakes are incredibly high.
Think about those first responders,
Mm.
healthcare workers, military personnel. They're dealing with life or death situations like on a daily basis.
Yeah.
They need to know that their team has their back, that they
Mm.
can rely on each other, and that their leaders have created a clear and supportive environment. Without that, it's a recipe for burnout.
You hit the nail on the head. If you're constantly worried about making a mistake, or if you're not even sure what your role is, it's going to take a toll on your mental and emotional well-being. Clarity really helps prevent burnout by providing that sense of control and purpose.
So it's not just about efficiency and productivity. It's about creating a work environment that's actually sustainable for the people who are, in the trenches every day.
Precisely. And when leaders prioritize clarity, they're essentially investing in the well-being of their team. They're creating a more sustainable environment for high performance. It's about recognizing that people are the most valuable asset in any organization, especially in those high-stakes fields where lives are often on the line.
And, this brings us back to that fantastic quote from Simon Sinek. He said, leaders are not responsible for the result. They are responsible for the people responsible for the results. It's a powerful reminder that leadership isn't just about barking orders. It's about creating those conditions for people to succeed.
It's about shifting the focus from, solely achieving outcomes to empowering those individuals who are actually responsible for those outcomes. It's about creating a culture of support and accountability where people feel safe to take risks, learn from their mistakes, and ultimately perform at their best.
It's about fostering that growth mindset where mistakes are seen as opportunities for learning and improvement rather than something to be punished.
Exactly. And that's what sets those truly exceptional leaders apart. They understand that clarity isn't just a tool for achieving goals, it's a fundamental element of creating a thriving and sustainable work environment. It's about investing in people, fostering trust, and creating a culture where everyone can succeed.
So, we've talked a lot about organizational clarity, the big picture stuff. But what about clarity at the individual level? What role does personal clarity play in all of this?
Oh, that's a fantastic question, and it's something that's often overlooked. Personal clarity is just as important as organizational clarity. It's about understanding your own strengths, weaknesses, values, and goals. It's about knowing what you're good at, what you need to work on, and what truly motivates you.
It's about having that self-awareness and being able to articulate your needs and expectations to your team and your leaders.
Exactly. And having that personal clarity allows you to contribute more effectively to the team's overall clarity. You're able to communicate more clearly, collaborate more effectively, and take ownership of your role with confidence.
It's like each individual having their own internal compass, which helps them navigate within that larger team compass.
I love that analogy. And when individuals within a team have that level of self-awareness and clarity, it creates a much more cohesive and high-functioning unit.
It's like a well-oiled machine where each part is working in sync with the others.
Precisely. And that synergy is what allows teams to achieve those extraordinary results, especially in those high-pressure, high-stakes environments we've been talking about.
It's been quite a journey exploring this foundational element of high-performing teams.
It really has been so fascinating, hasn't it? We've gone from, defining clarity within the context of HPWS to actually examining its impact on these real-world scenarios, from oil rigs to disaster zones to military operations.
Yet we've seen how, just the presence or absence of clarity can literally be the difference between success and failure, sometimes even life and death. And we've talked about how clarity extends beyond just achieving those results. It's about creating a work environment where people can truly thrive.
You got it. And now it's time to get practical. So what can you, the listener, do to actually cultivate more clarity in your own work life, both personally and within your team?
Right, that's the million-dollar question. We've given you all this information, but what are the actual steps, those actionable steps you can take to implement these principles?
Well, I think it all starts with self-awareness,
Yeah.
Take some time to really reflect on your strengths, your weaknesses, and what truly motivates you. What are you naturally good at? What really drains your energy? And what kind of impact do you want to make?
So it's like taking inventory of your own internal resources and figuring out how they align with the work you're actually doing.
Exactly. And once you have a better understanding of yourself, you can start to communicate those insights to your team and your leaders. Don't be afraid to ask for clarification on your role and responsibilities.
Yeah, yeah. It's so easy to just go with the flow and assume that everyone's on the same page,
Hmm.
but that can really lead to problems down the road.
Absolutely. If something feels unclear, speak up. It's always better to address any confusion early on than to let it fester and potentially lead to bigger issues. And don't underestimate the power of goal setting. Set clear, specific, and measurable goals for yourself, both short-term and long-term. This will help you stay focused and motivated, and it'll give you that framework for tracking your progress.
Okay, so we've covered that personal clarity, but what about building clarity within the team as a whole? Where do we even begin?
One of the most effective strategies is to create a culture of, open and honest communication. Encourage everyone to share their ideas and perspectives, even if they're different from yours. Create a space where people feel safe to disagree respectfully and to ask questions without fear of judgment.
It's about creating that psychological safety we talked about earlier, right?
Yeah.
Where people feel comfortable speaking up and sharing their thoughts without worrying about being ridiculed or punished.
Exactly. And regular team meetings, even short huddles can go a long way in fostering this kind of open communication. Use those meetings to review progress, address challenges, and ensure everyone is on the same page.
And it's not just about talking about those tasks and deadlines, right? It's also about taking the time to connect on a personal level, celebrate those successes, offer support during tough times, and build that sense of camaraderie.
You're absolutely right. That human connection is so important, especially in those high-stakes environments where the pressure can be so intense. It helps build trust and resilience, which are essential for navigating those inevitable challenges that come up.
So we've got open communication, those regular check-ins, but what about the more practical stuff, like documentation?
Ah, documentation.
Hmm.
It's like the unsung hero of clarity. Don't underestimate its power.
Hmm.
Clearly documented roles and responsibilities, meeting minutes, key decisions. Having a clear record helps avoid confusion and ensures that everyone has access to the same information.
It's like having that single source of truth that everyone can refer to, which can be a lifesaver when things get hectic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, clarity, it's not a one-time fix, it's an ongoing process. It requires consistent effort from everyone on the team, from the leader to the newest member.
So it's not about achieving perfect clarity and then just coasting along. It's about constantly checking in, making those adjustments, and ensuring that everyone is still on the same page as things evolve.
You got it. And the rewards are well worth the effort. When you have clarity, you have a team that's more focused, more productive, and ultimately more successful.
And most importantly, you create a work environment where people feel valued, supported, and empowered to do their best work.
Exactly. Clarity. It's the foundation for creating a truly high-performing team. One that can not only achieve its goals, but also thrive in the process.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into clarity, I want to leave you with one final thought.
Oh, please do share.
Clarity, it's not just about the absence of confusion, it's about the presence of purpose. When you have clarity, why you're doing what you're doing and how your efforts contribute to that bigger picture.
Yeah, that sense of purpose. It's incredibly powerful, especially in those high-stakes environments where the pressure is on. It's what keeps teams motivated, resilient, and ultimately successful. So go out there and be a champion for clarity. Start with yourself, then extend it to your team and your organization. The impact will be well worth the effort.
That's it for this episode of the Beyond Practice podcast. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into clarity. We hope you found it insightful and actionable. Don't forget to check out our website, beyondpracticePodcast.com, for more resources on this topic and for the full 7-part series on HPWS. Until next time, keep striving for clarity in both your work and your life.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.